You're on mute.
Chair, Derek America.
Thank you very much. With your new look, very much welcome. I see you've got the COVID look. Welcome, Honorable Member.
Morning, Chair Matlodi Maseko, present.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member.
Morning, Chairperson Deirdre Bartman, present.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Advocate.
Morning, Chair. Present.
Hey, Honorable Fighter. Welcome. We thought you won't be joining us. We welcome. I think for now, that's all that are honorable members that are present. And now the purpose also of this meeting is basically to look at two presentation. We'll be having a presentation from the Auditor General, as well as a presentation from the Department of the Premier, the forensic section of that department. Now, I think in terms of the agenda, we'll just ask the procedural officer, Mr. David, just to quickly take us through the agenda, and thereafter we are going to start with our meeting. Mr. David.
Dustin? Okay, I think you might have connectivity issues, Chairperson.
Is it?
Dustin? Yeah, Dustin? Okay, I'll take good morning, members, good morning, guests. I'll basically take the meeting through the proceedings for the day. So our first briefing will be with the AG, that is with Sharon and Gavin. Then the Department of the Premier will follow with the Provincial Forensic Services. Yeah. And then we'll have some internal documents that we are going to adopt as well. I think we just need to inform the committee as well that we are live on YouTube, and that we have members of the public and members of the media who's part of the meeting this morning.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think then what we'll do, Mr. David, back on the line again.
Yes, sorry, Chair.
Okay, no, I'm worried when you were not responding. No, that's good then. No, thanks very much. Now, what we are going to do then, can I give over to the Department of the Premier, if they can just introduce themselves and their delegation. What we'll do, members, we are not going to introduce everybody. I think as the team makes a presentation, they must introduce their team, and then we'll take it from there. Mr. Malila, I think it's Mr. Malila's. I can't hear. I think your audio.
Yeah, Chair, let me unmute myself.
Now. I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah, good morning to you, Chairperson, and thank you for the opportunity. Also, good morning to the members. We will present after the AG, but I just want to put on record that it's also Cabinet today. So I will be in and out, and my team will then inform me when it's our turn. But from the Department of the Premier, I've got on the line Henriette Robson. Henriette is the head corporate assurance. So she's responsible for all the corporate assurance functions, and forensic services sits within that space. Then I've got Ruthven also on the line, Chair. He is the senior manager responsible for forensic services, and he will take us through the presentation. And then I've got also my own CFO, Driekus Basson, that's also dialed in. So obviously, given the fact that this matter has got financial implications, Driekus can deal with some of the core issues, but we will try and coordinate ourselves, Chair. And then I've also got Hilton Arendse. Hilton is the Chief Information Officer, and this case effectively relates to one of his staff members. So, Chair, that is it from the side of the Department of the Premier. Just noting that I will be in and out, but I will definitely be there when we need to present, if that is okay with you, Chair.
Thank you very much. No problem, DG. Can we now go to the Auditor General's team?
Good morning, Chairperson. I'm Sharon Adams from the Auditor General that will be here doing the presentation this morning. I've also got Gavin van der Hoeven with me, and then also Sazin Dwanda. What I will request, Chair, if possible, because we have been requested from our office just to save data as far as possible. So they did ask us when we actually engage not to do video because that takes quite a bit of data. So if it's okay with you, Chair, can I put my video off for now, unless you request me that I must show my video?
So you are saying we want, in any case, I don't think we can see your face. We can only see your glasses. Your
Okay. You can still not see my face.
Now we can see. No, it's not a problem. So you'll only be showing the presentation.
That's correct, Chair, if it's okay.
Not a problem.
Okay, perfect.
As long as we can hear you talking through the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. Okay, so if I can go to the presentation immediately, and specifically in terms of, I think, the reputation promise, which speaks about the auditing to build public confidence, and I think that is the key one that I would like to just raise. But I think, first of all, I think thank you for the opportunity and for the invite for us to just be part of this meeting and to be able to provide the committee feedback relating to two matters that the committee has requested us to give feedback. One was on the audit of performance information, and the other one was on BBBEE that the committee specifically requests us to give some feedback on. So if I can immediately go to slide 4 of the presentation, and this is basically just giving an overview in terms of when we go through a process relating to performance information, what is the process that we're going through? And I think what's important to note in terms from an AGSA perspective, because I think the key concern from the members is when you're actually auditing this AOPO, how do you go about the selection? How do you determine what is important? So I think before I just go into the actual detail in terms of how we go about it, the key thing is when we actually do this specific work, what is important for us in terms of what we are supposed to do. First of all, the strategic plans of the departments is critically important, and the annual performance plan. Before that whole process happens of finalizing those strategic plans and the annual performance plan, from a national perspective, there's also some departments where we talk about customized indicator, where from a national perspective, they would indicate these are the specific indicators all provinces must include in their annual performance plan to assist that as a government as a whole, that we measure the same things and that we don't measure different priorities. And these priorities emanates via the NDP, via the MTSF, and ultimately then translating into the performance plan. I think key to note from an AGSA perspective overall, when we do this consideration to indicate what are the key programs or the key objectives in the case of entities that we will scope in, what is important for us is to look overall what the mandate of that department is or that entity. So critically important, we would base our selection based on the mandate of the department. So for example, for education, one of the key mandates is to make sure that they provide basic education to the learners. So some of the indicators or the program that we will select, we will focus specifically, for example, on the indicators relating to public schools and how that has transpired at the end of the day. So that is just on a high level when we actually look at the selection for the specific program. So the first part is it a customized indicator? So the customized indicator we would deem it significant. Secondly, also looking at the mandate of the specific department and entity and making sure in terms of their mandate, all of those key objectives has been included that's supposed to be included. What is also important, which is on the slide, when we actually then assess this information, it's basically twofold when we look at this information. So we look at the reliability of the information and the usefulness of the information. What is important to note from our side, when in a case there is specific things in the mandate of a department that's not included, we would normally report that in a management report. But from our side, based on those indicators that's included. We wouldn't indicate to the department it's incorrect indicators because that's a process internally, the department and entities, and also based on the members' oversight from the portfolio committees that do happen, that oversight needs to happen when those annual performance plan and strategic plans comes to those committees and then for approval. So from our side, what we basically assess, we look at first of all, I'll talk about the usefulness of the information. And of course, when we look at the usefulness of the information, when we look at this whole information, it's important. Those objectives that's in the strategic plan, are those objectives carried through to the annual performance plan? Does the department on a quarterly basis then report it, and that information translate then to the annual report? So what's important is to say we've indicated to the citizens these are the things that we are going to drive, and then ultimately what we are saying based on what you've indicated to the citizens, these are the things that you're going to drive. Are you then reporting on those things in your annual report? Those objectives that you said should be consistent with what you've reported. The other thing that's important when we look at the usefulness is about just the measurability of the indicator. So is this indicator in terms of the SMART principles, specific, measurable, accurate, reliable, and time-bound? And I think that is critical that we also look at. And the other important thing is the information verifiable. So the specific measure that is put there, will it be able to confirm it with audit evidence? And then the other part that we also look at is in terms of relevance, is those indicators relevant to the department's mandate? So we also focus on that. And then the last part when we look at the usefulness is on presentation and disclosure, where we actually look based on specific guidance that's provided by National Treasury. There's a specific way in which this information must be reported in the annual report. So we just make sure that it's compliant to that. The second part of it, we look at the reliability of the information. And here, what we basically confirm, the information presented, is it valid, accurate, and complete? And by that, we basically mean is if it's valid, is there specific procedures that the department has developed in terms of the standard operating procedures? Because based on these standard operating procedures, it will give members working at the department how this should be measured. So we first of look, is those things clear? Are there clear standard operating procedures that everybody knows when we measure this indicator, how we will measure it? So for example, if one of the indicators is that we need to provide textbook to kids at school, it needs to be clear when we measure that specific indicator, is it the case it will be a signature, a signed slip to say, as parents, we can agree that this textbook has been received. Is it the case that it's something that's signed off by the teacher to say, I've distributed these textbooks? So it needs to be clear, and that's when we talk about the validity. When it comes to the accuracy, it's about to say, if you've indicated that you've distributed 10,000 textbooks to grade 7s, can we actually confirm that 10,000 textbooks has been distributed to the grade 7? So that is the part where we look at the accuracy information. Does the evidence support what is reported? When it comes to completeness information, what we then do as auditors, we look from a different source. So what we're trying to establish here, the information that's disclosed, is all the information disclosed. So when we specifically look at this information, we would go back to source document, then to trace it back to the information that's disclosed. So from a reliability and a usefulness, that is basically what we look at. So key, again, I'm going to emphasize, we look at the core functions of the department or entity, what would be significant in terms of the public interest, in terms of that, and also specifically, what are those basic services that needs to be provided? So, for example, for municipalities, there is specific basic services in terms of water and sanitation, and that would be some of our key focus when we look at the reliability and the usefulness of information for predetermined objectives. So, in a nutshell, this is a process, I think, that has been started from 2014-15. What I can indicate overall from a department and entity perspective in terms of the maturity, when it comes to the usefulness of the information in terms of being consistent, being measurable, being relevant, and presentation and disclosure, there is quite a big maturity within the province. So we hardly do find findings in that area. Even in the prior year relating to reliability, there was very minimal findings really found that was reported in the in the audit report. And specifically with reliability, what the challenge is sometimes that we do find, if, for example, now in terms of our selection, we basically select another program or another indicator. What we do find sometimes that those control procedures are always not embedded. So for those ones, yes, that we've selected over a number of years, those control procedures are embedded. But as soon sometimes when we select a new one, we always don't find that those control procedures are embedded when it comes to the reliability of the information. But I can indicate over the number of years there has been maturity relating to the specific area on the usefulness of the performance information. I think for the next year, we will basically audit accordingly, and then as part of the oversight, we will provide then feedback to members when those annual reports are tabled and when we have to present back to the members relating to that. Okay. Chair, if I can maybe just continue with the second part, which is on the BBBEE, then if okay with you, Chair, then I will then open the floor up for questions. So the second one that we were just requested to provide feedback on was on the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act. And in terms of, I think, the finding that we've raised in the prior year relating to the specific matter. So last year it was for the first time from our office, based on the regulations that was there and the act, to basically look at this specific regulation. And I think what's important to note, in the prior year, this matter was reported in the management report and not an audit report matter. And I think the important thing, what is important to realize that also based on our conversation with the Provincial Treasury and also various departments, in terms of when this part of the section regulation came into being and when the implementation had to come, there was some overlap. And I think the other thing is the concerns that was also raised, that in terms of each department now having to basically rate themselves in terms of what level they are and the consequences of that. It was something also that the Provincial Treasury indicated that they will take up with National Treasury and DPSA to basically discuss this specific one trade and industry. And I think for us last year, we did raise the finding that about in 91% of the cases in the management report, this finding was included. What I can indicate just for this year, again, it's not something for this financial year that we will be reporting in the audit report. So if any findings are picked up, it will still remain in the management report because we are aware there is still conversations happening on a national level relating to how this matter should be dealt with, and also some additional work from a departmental perspective that needs to go in order to make sure going forward that's compliance. And I think there's from their side also some clarity that they've required that needs to be sought at the end of the day. So, and the main reason I think for that, when we basically look at the requirements in terms of those things that we basically scope in for auditing, I think one of our key focus is when we look at our scoping and also going back to the standards that we do apply, is important to look basically what would be the financial impact, and also what are those things that would be for public interest. And that is basically how we go about when we assess what should be the things that we would scope in from a compliance perspective. And I think when we actually scope in, there's also a lot of conversations that happen with National Treasury relating to some of the scoping requirements. But maybe I can just indicate for the BBBEE one, it's something that during this audit cycle we will follow up, but it's not something that for this financial year that we will be reported in the audit report. So I think for my side, Chairperson, through you, this is basically the two items that the members has requested us to come back and provide further feedback on. And I'm open basically for any questions at this point in time.
Thank you very much, Madam, for that. Now, members, there is the presentation. Can I get an indication or if there are any questions or point of clarity regarding it? Let's first start with the first one, which was dealing with the scope of audits on predetermined objectives. Are there any questions there or point of clarity?
Chair, I have a question, but it is more regarding, it's Deirdre Bartman speaking, it's more regarding the relationship between SCOPA and the AG specifically.
Yes, is on there? I first want us to deal with the predetermined objectives.
Okay, no problem, Chair.
Yeah, at first, are there any questions or point of clarity regarding the predetermined objective?
Yes, Chair, can I come in?
Yes, Honorable Member.
Okay. Chair, I just want to find out. So I'm going to make an example on the issue of education for the reliability and the usefulness. So the presenter talked about the learners, the issue of the learners. Now, if you are an AG and then you have to check the reliability and the usefulness for the side of the learners, I'm interested to hear, are you going to look at how many kids have passed or what was put in, how much was put in? What is it that you are looking at? Because we always, at the end of the year, as we get the results and you say Western Cape it performed better, then it's Gauteng the following year. What is it from the AG side that they see that is the motivation for the reliability of the usefulness in making sure that the anticipated outcome of what we plow in is with the learners, not the administrative that is happening within the department? I think that's its question.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Is there any response, AG?
Thank you, Chair, through you. The key point, thank you, Member, for that specific question in terms of what we basically look at. I think that the key point that I just want to make in terms of those indicators that's included. So there would be certain customized indicator, and a lot of times those customized indicator is based on the output. So there could be a number of things measured. So for example, it could be the pass rate of, say, grade 7 learners or grade 12 learners. So what we would basically do in those cases, so based on those indicators is there, we would specifically look at the nominator and the denominator. And based on the work that we would normally basically do in terms of looking at this, so we need to confirm, is this information reliable in terms of if there's a percentage calculation given. So we will look at the numerator and the nominator and the denominator to come to that determination. What's important to note in terms of the type of indicator that's put in. So for example, if one of the key things that you need to measure the pass rate of learners. So your indicator would be to measure the pass rate of learners. We wouldn't tell you what indicator you've put in is correct, is incorrect, because that would be the decision by the HOD, which has that responsibility, and then from an oversight perspective. So we would not indicate that indicator. You must actually measure, like the member said, the number of passes instead of the inputs that go into. What we will look at when it comes to reliability, if we look at the usefulness and the indicators not smart in terms of being specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, we will basically raise those findings in that regard. But we don't dictate to any department what is the type of indicator that you are supposed to include it. All we do from our part, based on those indicators that's included in there, we basically audit it accordingly. What we do normally do when it comes to the measurability of the information, we do basically upfront also before plans are normally finalized, allow departments sometimes ask us to review, to provide input, to say, in terms of this measure, does it comply with the SMART principles? And in those cases, we do provide feedback, but in no ways do we dictate to any entity or department what are the indicators they are supposed to include in the annual performance plan. I hope that answers the member's question.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Chair. Can I come in again, Chair?
Yes.
On the same issue. Okay, thank you very much. Now, what I want to find out and help me out, I always try to get the rationale in some of the outcomes versus what we argue about as we get the reports. So the mandate of the education, which is more the learners. Now, in the scope of the treasury, as you get it as the AG for the customized indicators, is there the learners the priority? Is there a common thing? Maybe if I can say, is there a common indicator that every year as you do the auditing, is there based on the learners only, or it changes also? It's just the classes that it will be now you are doing the grade 12 and then it will be the grade 7 or the grade 1s?
AG?
Thank you, Chair. Basically, through you. So basically, how we would go about doing this. So, for example, we would select programs. So if a specific program is selected, for example, public schools would be maybe one of the programs that is selected. We have to do all those indicators that is part of that program. So it's not a case that within that program we select the specific indicators. So all of those indicators that's included in there, we would normally then we have to select it, because what we would have done, we would have identified that specific program also based on the RAND value that is specifically given for that specific program. And then based on our assessment, so we look at it twofold, the mandate, the RAND value, and then make a decision to say what would be the most material programs to audit. So in these cases, yeah, so that is how so it's not within that program we audit specific things. So if we've selected the program, we have to do all those indicators in that program.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Honorable Masego. Hey, your question is very detailed. You go to the specifics. Thanks very much for that, Honorable Member. Any other question, Honorable Members, on the predetermined objectives? If there are no further questions on that.
Chair, Dre Bartman.
Yes, Advocate.
With the responses and thinking about the relationship now between the AG and the Western Cape government and the predetermined objectives. Last year, it is my understanding that the AG, when they decide their predetermined objectives, that when they decide the scope of what they are going to audit, that was done before COVID, before the coronavirus. So I just want to understand, because certain programs may have been selected before Corona came into account. So how exactly is the Auditor General going to adjust the scope of auditing now that Corona has had an impact? Because obviously finances and projects and programs may have changed during the situation. And also, if I understand correctly, the dates for the financial statements, the annual financial statements, have also changed. So how is that also going to be taken into account? Because at the end of the year, when the AG comes before SCOPA, they're going to give us this is what we think. But now, while we have the AG here, we need to understand, are they actually using the correct predetermined objectives for the outcome that they're going to come show us at the end of the year? Thank you, Chairperson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Advocate. Yes, it's a very loaded question. AG?
Thank you, Chair, through you, and thank you so much, Member, for that question. What I can indicate, so as the member has mentioned that the date now, the updated date for the departments and entities to submit their annual financial statements for auditing is the 31st of July. And then we need to be done with our audit process by the 30th of September in terms of the legislation. Just the other thing that I just wanted to note, in the case of legislatures and parliament, they don't have the same extension. So they will still be submitting by the end of May, the annual financial statements. I think important to note, member, and you're 100% right, in terms of what we are facing currently, the epidemic, COVID-19. As an AGSA, also, we are going back to the drawing board to relook at stuff. And I don't know if you've seen recently, the AG has been in the media in the last 2 weeks very vocal about COVID-19 funds and how those funds are spent, and the president specifically requesting the AG to do specific work proactively relating to this. So relating to the consideration for predetermined objectives, so yes, we're busy going back to the drawing board, but I want us also to allow this conversation that needs to happen with the various HODs and the various departments in relation to that. So we will be having that conversation with them in terms of relooking at our strategic plan and communicating that to them. So that process hasn't unfolded because from our side, we were not in contact for the last month, basically, with any department or entity based on these extensions that was given. And we were under level 5 lockdown. So that conversations has not happened yet. But we are thinking about it and having conversation about, so I can assure the members that we are having those thinking about those things, but I would like that and conversation also just to occur with the necessary departments for us to be able to move forward. So I can assure the member, definitely we are making these consideration as part of our audit approach for the 2019-20 year, and this will be informed by us issuing our revised strategic plans to the various departments and the entities.
Chair, can I comment? DG?
Yes, DG.
Again, good morning, Chair. I just want to connect to what Sharon has indicated. I think the key thing is that the 1920 audit year, and even I think the 2021, is going to be very challenging. And I want to assure the scoper that between government and EXA, we already had 2 discussions, one before the lockdown, and in fact 2 days ago we had a similar discussion with the AG, that's the Department of the Premier, and the Treasury jointly, basically around the audit process of this year, and more importantly also the points that's been raised by Member Bartman and yourself on the PDOs, and just how do we approach things in this difficult period. So we've agreed that next week and Sunday evening, we've got a PTM meeting. We're inviting the EXA to that meeting because, in fact, there are many things that we need to consider during this entire process. I mean, there is the return to work policy. We need to make sure that everything is safe because we do not want to transmit or spread the disease in any of the documents and the communications and discussions between government and EXA. But I think the assurance I want to give to the committee is that it's something that we're all aware of. We're not just sitting in our own space and EXA sitting in their own space. We've got these institutionalized discussions on a senior level. And I think we jointly realize that we need to do what we need to do this year to actually get through the audit. That also includes relooking at our APPs as well as our SPs. The Department of Performance Monitoring and Evaluation have already sent early signals that that's going to be possible, but we can only do that once the fiscal environment becomes more clear. And in fact, we're having our own internal meetings today, and that will only be clear, Chair, once the Treasury obviously gets the final numbers and indications from National as to how each of the provinces will be impacted. I can already indicate to you, and I mean the President announced it, that there's going to be huge implications for provinces from a fiscal perspective. And in fact, there's going to be certain things this year that we would not be able to do because we're not going to have the fiscal resources. So it means that we need to go back to the drawing board in relation to a lot of our issues. But in relation to the previous year, 1920, we are working jointly with EXA to ensure that we do what we need to do to close off that year. But the final point, Chair, is that from the administration side, we've given EXA the assurance that we're pushing very hard on maintaining good governance in this space. And therefore, even NTS issued a circular around the COVID spending after long discussions at FOSAT. And we're not going to let go on the good governance strand and strategy that we've been pushing over the last year. And it's been a joint effort. So notwithstanding the conditions, we're going to maintain that agenda, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks very much, DG. Yellow?
Chairperson, I have a follow-up question.
Yes, Advocate.
Chair, what I want to ask is, and I'm going to ask it in the resolutions as well. And the reason I'm going to ask it is because I don't like surprises. In my family, I ask people what they want for their birthdays and I get them that. I don't like surprises. I would like to ask the AG and the Premier's office, before the annual reporting comes to SCOPA, before we deal with the end of the year items, they must come back to us after their conversation to tell us, okay, these are the X, Y, and Z's that have changed when we are going to do the auditing. I want them to come and tell SCOPA exactly, this is what we were going to do. We're not doing that anymore. This is what we're going to do now. Because I don't want surprises at the end of the year in SCOPA. I don't want people saying SCOPA is only finding out about this at the end of the year. We need to know ongoingly what the AG and the Western Cape government is doing in terms of auditing for this year.
I think that's fair. Chair, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much for that, Advocate, because also, you know, as much as auditing, it's a post-factor activity, but also the important component of auditing, especially of us as the public accounting committee, is monitoring on a regular basis. When you monitor something on a regular basis, it is definitely going to prevent these surprises that the Advocate is talking about. No, thank you very much for that question, Honorable Bartman. Are there any other further questions? If there are no further questions on this, then any questions on the PE, triple PE? Advocate, I know you said you had the question.
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Chair, my question is relating comments and questions I've previously asked in this committee. So previously we've heard, one, when you audit, you take a sample and you audit that sample and you make a finding on that sample. That was the first thing we heard. Okay. The second thing we heard was that because of national legislation, with triple BE specifically, instead of taking the sample the same way the auditor would do, you have to go through all of the information and then make a finding. That was the second thing that was told to us. The third thing that was told to us, that not only must you essentially audit now the second time, but you must now pay for a second time for the auditing, and for the independent person to come in and to do all of this auditing on the triple BE. So essentially, you are paying twice to check the same information, if you understand what I mean, Chair. And we've heard examples from different departments and entities on possibly how much such would cost. Some departments and entities could not answer us and said that they would have to come back to us. And then one of our resolutions, I think previously, was that we find out what the full amount would be for the auditing of triple BE in terms of the national legislation for all of our departments and all of our entities in order to deal with that particular finding from the AG. Because, Chairperson, a decision has to be made, because in the end, otherwise, every single year, we're going to see it in the AG report, and every single year is going to be listed as a challenge. But if there's no decision being made on how we're going to do this or who is going to pay, then we're going to deal with this every single year. And we have 5 years ahead of us, Chairperson. Thank you.
I think that question is kind of a double-edged question. It can be answered by both the DG as well as the AG as well. Let's start with the AG.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chair, through you. And I think maybe in terms of just to provide some clarity, because I know the member has mentioned certain points about samples finding, a second time auditing. And part of this question, I think, really relates to the DG maybe to respond to, because I think it's not in our ambit to say how they need to go about resolving the matter. But important to note in terms of when we're auditing, that I just wanted to clarify. The members 100% right, through you, Chair, that we do select samples. So normally when you, as part of the audit methodology and audit process in the standards, when you go through that process of selecting samples, a number of items, in that population that you've selected, if there's errors in the population, because remember, you're not doing 100% testing when you select a sample. So if there's errors in the population, as an auditor, what you need to confirm, if there's errors in this specific sample that I find, is there more errors in the population? So normally what would happen, so your first point of call is when you select a sample, you're expecting not to find errors. But if there's errors in a population, then in terms of the audit process, management then should go back to fix the population, and then we need to re-audit, because based on the errors that I found, I cannot confirm that the rest of the population doesn't have errors. And hence, I have to go back and retest when the population is fixed, because otherwise, if there's errors in the population and I say it's fine, then I've got big problems as an auditor in terms of my own integrity. So hence, when there's errors in the population, I have to go back to be able to give that opinion that this information is fairly presented. And I cannot just leave it there and not to do the retesting. So the first point of call is not to find errors in the population. And then secondly, so when we found those errors, we have to go back in terms of our methodology, in terms of the auditing standard, to go do that retesting, because then I will be able to say, for that specific account balance, I can reasonably conclude as an auditor that it fairly represent what is represented there. So I think that is the part of the question that I thought I would respond to, but maybe I'll give over, Chair, through you then for the DG to respond to the other part.
Sorry, Chair, can I ask clarity before DG comes in so that he can cover me if...
Yes, yes,
okay.
Yes, Honourable Marcel.
Thank you very much. I think with the first part, the AG was fed to my brain in giving an example. The initial problem that was there, like the heading of the whole thing, was the interpretation. Now, as we go with the interpretation of the BBBEE, and then you do the sample taking, and you talk also now about the errors in the population. What interpretation was there? Because I think that's what came out, that also there was another company that got in to come and do that auditing. So I want to understand from the AG side, the interpretation, what did it say to that interpretation of the BBBEE, so that we can have an understanding from their side. I do understand the Treasury is still busy with that, but they did auditing on that and there was a finding. And what was that interpretation for that finding to be there?
Chair.
DG.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'd like maybe Aziz from Treasury is also on this call to also comment. I mean, my understanding really is that, I mean, this is an old matter that's been coming on for some time. And obviously it's been discussed within the Treasury environment nationally, as well as the National Department. So the National Treasury has engaged with the Department of Trade and Industry, and they've basically agreed on a joint approach, particularly as it relates to disclosure. And obviously the AG is an independent institution, Chair. I mean, we can't dictate to them what they must audit and how they must audit and how they need to do the work. But my understanding is that the DTI has issued a note that will be included in each of the annual reports. And that note will obviously, according to the DTI, not be subject to a detailed audit. But again, I make the point that we cannot dictate to EXA what they need to audit and not to audit. And then also the government institutions will have to make a statement similar to the one that I've just indicated on information in the BBBEE, and it will not carry any cost to the department in terms of the certification. So it's basically just a certificate and a note that needs to be made. And then obviously the role that EXA will have to play is to confirm that the department has appropriately disclosed that note. And if they've not appropriately disclosed it, it's obviously then to make a ruling, on that particular issue. I don't know, Aziz, if you would like to comment, or maybe Trikus from the Department of the Premier on this particular matter. Aziz?
Okay. Thanks, DJ, and good morning, members. The DG is absolutely correct. National Treasury identified that for a department to get
Where is Aziz? Sorry, where is Aziz? Aziz, we don't see you.
I think the chair wants to see your photo, Aziz, and not just a pic, if you don't mind.
That's the real Aziz.
Yeah, that's Aziz. You know him.
But you are busy fighting an invisible enemy now. We don't want people to be invisible as well.
Thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up on this matter. National Treasury has identified that for each department and each government institution, it costs about 85,000 Rand per certificate to get BBBEE compliant certification. It doesn't bode government well for a government institution to ask of another government institution that they are BBBEE compliant. So what has been agreed is that DTI has agreed that there will only be disclosure in the annual report, and the AG, in any case, when they audit a supply chain and they look at the tender documents already has an indication of if somebody is triple or what level of compliance a particular supplier is. So correctly said that the cost for BBBEE will not be incurred in the current year, and as long as it's reported as such in terms of the numbers of suppliers as well as anything BBBEE is appropriately disclosed in the annual report, there should be no further implications for a department. Oversight will still have then a view of how in the country we are dealing with BBBEE. Thanks, Chair.
Chairperson,
Aziz,
maybe
Aziz.
to you. Sorry.
Yes, thank you very much, Aziz. AG?
Sorry, Chair, through you, maybe just to answer Member Maseko's question, just in terms of the issue that we've raised, because I don't think we've adequately responded to, if you will allow me, Chair.
Yes.
So, okay. So basically the question that the finding that was raised was more about the certification. And I think maybe, so it was to say, is the certification in place, yes or no? And if there wasn't, the finding would have been raised. So it had nothing to do with sample selection, but I think where the departments is coming from, the sample selection basis. So for example, one of your confirmation for certification, for example, is in terms of your HR information, that you need to confirm your HR data in terms of your number of employees, males and females, in terms of racial and ethnic background. So that would be one of the requirements that you will have to do. Now, from the AGSA office, when we audit payroll, we audit a sample. We don't do 100% testing. When you have to do the BBBEE certificate, you have to verify the employees 100%. And maybe that's where the concern came from the department, say some of the work is done by AG now, some of the work will have to be redone if somebody has to provide certification for us. So the finding purely that we've raised from our side is to say, there's supposed to be certification, there isn't certification. And I think the concern from the department sides was to say some of this work has been done by AG and now some of this work must be redone. And I think that was the concern.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Chair.
Chairperson, the department.
Advocate.
Chair, I just want a few yes or no follow-up answers quickly. Okay. I know it's sometimes complicated to answer yes or no, but I'm going to try to keep my questions simple. Not simplistic, but simple. So, do we confirm that for this year, we're not going to incur extra expenses, that 85,000 Rand per department, approximately, for the BBBEE certification? Is that a yes?
AG Premier?
From the Provincial Treasury, I can confirm yes, no department will have to incur the cost for BBBEE certification for themselves.
Okay. Our Chairperson, the second yes or no question is, will every department still require the certification? Because payment for certification and requiring the certification are two different things.
Again, Aziz Harding from Provincial Treasury. There are discussions between the Department of Trade and Industry and the Commissioner of the BBB or the BBBEE Commission in terms of what is the certification required at no cost.
Okay, so right now at this moment, it is likely a yes, you'll need the certification, but you won't be paying for it. Okay, now the third question, Chairperson, is we've obviously now spoken about the process, but now the question is why? Why do you still need the certification if it's already being audited as part of your annual report?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
maybe
quite
I can respond.
Okay, AG.
Chair, if you allow me, I will respond. So I think what's important to note in terms of the certification, there is much more requirements that is required than we do in an audit. So maybe just to clarify that. And I think the one example that I've made in terms of from an HR perspective, you've got to confirm your employees to say, these are, if I've got 500 employees on my employee database, I can confirm these are 500. I can confirm in terms of ethnic, racial, male, female, and so on. From our side, what we do, of those 500 employees, we select a sample of 30 people. You understand? So you can't say because we select 30 that everything is okay. Because in terms of getting the certification, it needs to be confirmed, is there 500 employees working there? And there's specific detail that needs to be confirmed that is not part of an audit process. So I think that is the point that I just wanted to make relating to that. But as Aziz has indicated, there's other processes that they've now worked around how these certificates can be issued to the various departments and entities.
Chairperson Deirdre Bartman, I know I'm being very difficult today, but I feel like the answers are giving me more questions than anything else.
Yes. Advocate, are you finished?
No, Chair. So, Chair, I completely understand. My accounting and my auditing from Varsity is very, very, very rusty, very. But I understand the sample. In our annual reports, we take a sample most, no? And then we say, okay, you have a clean audit or you don't have a clean audit based on the sample we've taken. Now, the question then is, the reason I asked why is because for the BBBE, the requirements require you to go check 100% everything. Now, we can't say for BBBE, it is required for us to check everything in order for us to make sure that you're fine. But for annual reports, we say that it's fine if we just take a sample because then we're going to say you have a clean audit. We are now speaking in two tongues because either it is okay to check information using a sample or it is not. Either it is okay to check everything 100% or it is not. It is just one of those two. You can't be okay with checking 100% for some things, but checking samples for others. If you understand what I mean, Chair.
Yeah.
Because with the BBBE, when you take the sample, if I have 10 Smarties, and those 10 Smarties, I've said, okay, these are the things in those 10 Smarties that I must check for taste and visual and what's. Okay, now I take my sample of 3 and I check whether the Smarties are fine. But now when it comes to BBBE, I still have to check those same things. And let's say extra requirements, you have to do the visual, the taste, the hearing, everything. But now you're saying, okay, we have to check all 10 Smarties. So either we have to check everything for the annual reports or we must check a sample. Either we must check everything for BBBE or we must check a sample, because now we're speaking about two different approaches.
Okay. Chair, maybe if I can respond, I can assist. So I think maybe what we must not confuse is different methodologies. So I just want to clarify that. So for the BBBEE requirements, there's specific things and specific standards that must be done in a specific way. So that's something separately. From an audit process, there's a specific methodology and specific standards that you follow. So I think we must just divorce the two. It's not one process. It's not the same process. Just from an audit perspective, sometimes you do agreed upon procedures as part of an audit process where you do a separate type of audit and you agree, these are the procedures that I'm going to do and only these procedures are performed. And based on that, your audit report will be issued. So you do get different type of audit reports. So when a BBBEE certificate is issued, that person that does the certification, so it's not an audit like a normal audit report you get, that person will just do the certification to say, this requirement, I was supposed to check X, I was supposed to check Y, I was supposed to check Z, and I've checked X, Y, Z, and Z. And then they will sign a certificate. So you won't get like us when we normally audit the annual financial statements where we issue an audit report with an audit opinion. And I think that is the difference that between the two. In the one part, we issue an audit opinion to say this information fairly present based on the work that we've done. In the other part, it's a certification. And maybe, Chair, through you, if more discussion is needed to say, let's take what is in BBBEE, what the audit process, and speak about that difference, because there's a huge difference between the two. Because on the one side, you just do a certification to say, these are the things that you were supposed to require with. I was supposed to confirm that you have this, that you have this. And I did that confirmation, and hence I certified. So it's two separate processes, basically, that does happen.
So I think then it's just clear from this brief discussion we had on BEE and the report that we are getting from the AG and other input that is from the DG as well as from the Provincial Treasury. I don't think we'll be doing justice to the topic of BEE in this short space of time, because it looks like the more we get clarity, the more questions we actually have. Maybe it might be good, because we said this thing must come here, because every time we are confronted by various departments of the province, they always present their audited statement, and we always ask them about BEE, all of them. And then based on what they have reported to us, say, look, let's get the AG to see how we can actually assist, because part of the reason we had this guy, we want to make sure that we are compliant with the BEE. Maybe we might need another discussion, maybe as the committee, just on BEE, how we can make sure that this department comply. The only reason we have, the main reason we have this discussion, because we want our department to comply. Maybe we must just put aside some time just to deal with BEE, and we are, if it means maybe it will be the half a day dealing with that, we deal with that, so that we know that even before we can even start, we know which questions to ask even to the department as well.
Sorry, Chair, can I come in?
Yes.
Okay, I think maybe what needs to happen is we need to allow the processes that the Treasury and the DDG mentioned that the Treasury is busy with for certification and everything to happen. And then when they are done, is then that we can say they need to come, so that we can find out now that what are the pros and cons that are in place for the future when coming to the BBBEE, because I tend to believe that it has been going on for a long time, that also it's one of those things that are a hassle to them, that they want to have a solution so that we don't move on with it as a problem to us and to them also.
I've got no problem with that.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Chair, I think that is fair. And I think it will also assist the entire discussion that you want to have as a scope, and between the two departments, we're open to come and assist or facilitating the discussion around BEE, how it links into the work that we're doing per department.
Excellent. Just before my last question, if there are no other questions, are there any other questions from members on BEE? Hello?
Yes. No, from my side, it's not a question per se, but it's just a compliment to the treasurer for its commitment in saying that the issue that Member Bartman earlier raised about the double payment of certificates and all these other challenges that we previously encountered, that they will curb that, which means therefore it's a step towards the right direction. And also the issue of us coming here is not just to hold people accountable, but it is also to assist them to be able to comply. So on the issue of the triple BEE, there is a serious challenge that Western Cape has got that hurdle of non-compliance, and which gives us an unnecessary red light. So I think the direction that is being taken by the, especially the Treasury, it is going to assist us. But in terms of the presentation that was presented here, it is said that the Triple BE Act, it has got to be, we need to ensure that there is compliance at all spheres of government. And our challenge that we've been having all along is that our departments would comply with everything. But when it comes to Triple BE, they are not. But now the AG's responsibility, it is to highlight when there's those red errors that are there. So from my side, I just wanted to compliment the Treasury for such a commitment.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. But I must say, man, this 85,000 rand, it's a lot of money, eh? Yeah.
Chair, per certification per department. So times
10, times 11 or times 14. And also not only the department, but also entities as well, eh?
Chair, the 85,000 happened before Corona. The Treasury said that won't happen again. So move on.
Now, also, the AG, it will have been, maybe when we come back, because part of us discussing this triple BE is because BE, there's an act. It's an act of parliament. That means it's the law of the country. It needs to be implemented. I know recently there's been a test case where Solidarity took the Department of Tourism to court on the issues of compliance in terms of the BEE. It would have been interesting to have actually maybe got maybe when we meet again regarding this matter, when the National Treasury, the DTI, and even the Department of the Premier and our Provincial Treasury have had that collective meeting, when they come back to us, it will be interesting that we might also get that that High Court judgment might actually assist us in terms of how to comply and how not to comply.
Sorry, Chair. I think in the resolution, if we can remember, we said that we are going to get this discussion with the AG and the Treasury and the other stakeholders. Then after we have gotten the explanation and the interpretation and everything for us to understand, we still have to call all the departments individually to come so that they can tell us what is so difficult for each and every department to get it correct when coming to the triple BEE. So we are still in the process that eventually it will address that issue that you are talking about, to hear from each department why that is not happening, if it's not happening, and those who are championing it, how did they go about to champion it?
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions on the AG? If there are no further questions, that yes, AG, yes, TG.
I just want to, Aziz must just make a point here, and I don't want to reopen the debate about this 85,000, but institutionally, my understanding is that the Treasury has engaged with each of the departments and have requested the CFOs not to pay, and there were only 2 institutions, and I don't know whether that's in the 1920 year, which have paid, but that was before the National Treasury and DTI engagement. So in the broader scheme, there are only 2 institutions, and the word has gone to departments not to pay, and the Treasury has actually checked that. So I would actually also suggest, Chair, when you do your oversight with the departments, maybe as part of the annual reporting process, if you want to have further confirmation, is maybe to also pose that question particularly to the departments. But at the moment, the arrangement is that nobody pays, and given the fact that that is post the agreement between NT and TTI, as suggested by myself and also as indicated by Aziz.
Thanks very much, DG. If there are no further questions, then honorable members, that means we at least come to the end of this discussion with the AG. Let me make use of the opportunity to thank the AG. I don't know whether is there anything that they'd like to say?
No, Chairperson, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We are actually very happy that eventually we've managed to have this meeting. I know it has been postponed for a very long time and a number of times. AG, we do understand your busy schedule. You must always remember that you are a very important partner in our drive to try and hold Parliament and also the executive accountable. So you are a very important partner. So whenever we want this meeting, it's not because we want them, because we want to be difficult. It's because we want to make sure that as our partner, you have actually informed us and actually armed us with all the relevant information that we need in order to hold Parliament accountable. Thank you very much for your availability.
Chair, from my side, noted. We'll make sure we avail ourselves in future. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Now, then that move us now to the next item, honorable members, which is going to be the Department of the Premier. Can I hand over?
Thank you, Chair. We've been asked to do two things as a department. The one is obviously to brief you on the 2 fraud and corruption cases which were opened and closed within my department during 2018-2019. So that relates to the previous financial year, or actually previous financial year. And then the second issue was the cases investigated per department for the Q1 and Q2 of 1920. So I've asked Ruthven Jansen van Rensburg to actually provide you with a full detail of what is happening in his space around provincial forensics. And then I think post that, Chair, if there are any questions relating to the Department of the Premier, particularly relating to point 1, I've got my CFO and my CIO here to respond to those issues. We have, I think, provided you with a response on it. So, Chair, if I can hand straight over to Ruthven to take us through the presentation. So you will share it, on Teams, and we can actually just follow him, in relation to the detail. Thank you very much. Ruthven?
Thank you, Honourable Mvimbi. Thank you, DG. And members of the committee. Allow me firstly to put some faces to the Provincial Forensic Services, to introduce the management team of the Provincial Forensic Services. It consists of myself and then 2 directors, between whom the 13 provincial departments, their portfolios are split to deal with investigations and also the proactive work that we do. So firstly, Tsegufatsu Muwe, she's a director and dealing with mainly education, but also the G&A cluster. So Tsego, I don't know whether you are here.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee, and thank you, Ruthven.
Okay, and then the second director is Wendy Hansby. She deals with the Department of Health and the Department of Transport and Public Works and the social cluster.
Good morning, Chairperson, members of the committee, and thank you, Ruthven.
Okay, Chairperson, with your agreement, I will then proceed with item 3.1 on the agenda to brief the committee on the 2 cases that were finalized in 2018-19, if I understand the procedure correctly. Now, firstly, okay. I also, Chairperson, understand that the case summaries, some narrative, had been provided with the committee, to the committee, and I will take the committee through some salient points in connection with those two cases. So if I can proceed with case number 16 of 1718. This was a case that was received from a whistleblower alleging that there may have been conflict of interest when an official of the Department of the Premier formed part of the procurement panel that appointed her previous employer as a service provider. Now, there's a full forensic investigation into this matter, and it consisted of examination of payment packs, perusal of email communications, other communications documents, background searches, consideration of laws and prescripts, as well as interviews with several witnesses and the person implicated. Now, this investigation revealed that the allegation was unsubstantiated. It revealed that the official concerned left the previous employment approximately 6 years prior to the procurement process, that there was no direct or circumstantial evidence to indicate that the official had any business, commercial, financial interest at the time of the procurement with the service provider or any possible conflict of interest. In fact, the investigation showed that the official informed the manager and other officials in the department of her previous employment at the service provider. So she revealed it. And there was a competitive procurement process on IPS. 2 quotations were received, and we were satisfied during the investigation that the evaluation of the bids were correct. So we found the allegation to be unsubstantiated. However, as we investigated, there were a couple of control recommendations that we deemed important to make to the department of possible weaknesses that could be addressed. And if I can take the committee through those. Firstly, we noted on the accounting officer's system, the supply chain management system, that it provides for the appointment of a quotation committee, which is discretionary when dealing with procurement between 10,000 and 500,000. So there is a discretionary decision to whether or not to appoint a quotation committee in those kind of instances, and we felt that there's a different practice in the different business units. So therefore, we recommended that the department consider establishing criteria in the accounting officer system, or otherwise operationally, or factors to be considered in determining whether a quotation committee should be appointed. Now, on this recommendation, some time back, the department advised us that the recommendation was implemented. The second recommendation that we made is that the department ensure that all officials participating in supply chain management processes sign formal declarations of interest for every procurement process. And on this recommendation, the department also confirmed that all quotation committees, bid specification committees, evaluation and adjudication committee members are required to sign formal declarations of interest during those meetings. The third recommendation that we made was that the department defined the term software as a service. So it's a kind of service that is procured, but that it should define software as a service and include it in the supply chain management delegations, because there seemed to be confusion between the different business units, what process to follow if they acquire or if they procure software as a service. Now, on this recommendation, the most recent response that we have on record from the department is that the review of the supply chain management delegations are still in process. So this recommendation has not been implemented yet, but it is receiving attention. So Chairperson, that is the one case. I don't know whether you would like me to proceed with the next, or whether you have any questions at this point in time.
No, please proceed to the next case so that when we ask question, I can say, look, question on the first case and question on the second case.
Thank you, Chairperson. So the second case was number 28 of 1718. This case was also received by Provincial Forensic Services from a whistleblower. And so we received the allegation that of corrupt conduct by an official in the department. It was alleged that the senior official approached a service provider. Now let's call this service provider A, to solicit a bribe subsequent to that service provider A being awarded a contract. Again, we conducted a full forensic investigation into this matter, and in brief, it revealed that this implicated official, approached service provider A with a request to use resources of a previous service provider that delivered that specific service in the past, whose contract had ended. And now service provider A agreed to this, to use the resources of the previous service provider. And but then shortly thereafter, this official approached service provider A for a commission, which is solicited a bribe from the service provider. The investigation also established that this official chaired a bid specifications committee and altered official procurement documents, which resulted in the approval of a just over 10 million rand contract, rather than the initial 4.3 million approved by that committee. This led to an order being created in favor of service provider A of just over 10 million rand. Now, during the investigation, we lodged a case, a criminal matter with the Hawks, and laid charges of fraud, forgery, and uttering with the police. Also, during the investigation, prior to conclusion of that, we understood that the official concerned, the implicated official, terminated his employment before the expiry of his employment contract that would have been in April 2018. So we dealt with the criminal aspect. There could no longer be disciplinary action, but we made the following recommendations also. There was obviously criminality in this matter, but the following further recommendations were made. Firstly, whether the department, as a result of this forgery and uttering by the official, for the department to examine that and to determine whether it was deprived of value for money, which may necessitate the institution of a civil claim, or whether irregular expenditure arose from these actions. Now, on this recommendation, the department responded that the department conducted an internal investigation and concluded that the expenditure does not amount to irregular expenditure. The second further recommendation that was made was that in view of the different interpretations that we found in the investigation about certain supply chain processes, in the one particularly relevant here is the piggyback process, where a department piggybacks on another department's procurement process to acquire certain services. On this, we found that there were different interpretations of the requirements, and we recommended that legal services provide advice or clarity regarding the correct process to be followed when goods or services are procured by means of a piggyback process. Now, on this recommendation, the department responded that the implementation of the recommendation will be held in abeyance pending receipt of the final National Treasury instruction on this, which is apparently under consideration at the moment. And then, Chairperson, the third recommendation that was made is that the department implement a practice in which the minutes of the various procurement committees should depict all deliberations, and that each page of the approved minutes and recommendations be signed by the chairperson of the specific committee to prevent a recurrence where someone after a committee considered a matter then falsified some of the, or changes some of the pages. So, and on this recommendation, the department responded that it implemented this recommendation, that all minutes now include the full item or service description, the quoted amount, the quotation number, the CI DITCOM number, and all members of the committee are to initial each page of the minutes, quotations that served before the committee, and the BC recommendation. So that is the second, that brings me to the end of the second case, Chairperson.
Thanks very much, Mr. Van Rensburg. Honorable members, if we let's deal with the first case, case 16 of 2017, that deals with the conflict of interest. Any questions on that? If there are no questions on that, can we move on to the next case? Case 28 of 1718 of the corrupt relationship. Any questions? No questions.
Thanks. Sure. Thank you.
There are no questions, honorable members. Okay, so that means that we have come then to the end of this presentation if there are no questions.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we then move on to the next item? Thank you very much, TG and the forensic team. Highly appreciated.
Yeah. Chair, it's still the same team that's going to make the presentation. So again, if I can just ask Ruthven just to take us through the cases in the first and second quarter of last year. So it's really just the numbers so that you can get an understanding of what is going on in the space. And I mean, Ruthven will also indicate some of this work has been completed, some of the work has not been completed. What we also do in most cases, chairs, obviously given I think some of the sensitivities around it, you will see that we try and stay away from names and all that stuff. And if you want kind of specific information, we can actually move into that space, particularly those cases where it is still work in progress, because obviously it's still the subject of an investigation and people can actually still appeal an outcome or whatever the case is. So when you see all of this, you will see that those things are obviously not disclosed. And what we do is we're just giving you a sense or flavor of actually what is happening in the space. So, Chair, if you're okay to proceed on that basis, we can continue. Ruthven?
Thank you. Chairperson, yes, I've shared the presentation on the Teams platform. I hope it is visible to all.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Then I will proceed to firstly, this slide is the caseload reconciliation of all departments. So this deals with the cases that were dealt with in the first and second quarter of 2019-20 financial year. Now you will notice there, as at the beginning of the first quarter, we had 34 cases of allegations of fraud, corruption, irregularities on hand. In those 2 quarters, we received 18 cases, in the 2 quarters, we finalized 19 forensic investigations, and I think the bulk of this presentation will deal with the matters that we finalized as per your brief. There was one case that was a duplicate case, the same allegation was received from different sources, and at the end of 30 September 2019, there were 32 cases, forensic cases on hand, and below, the table below reflects the status of those cases. Of the 32 cases, it shows that 25 cases were in progress by our investigators. They were in the different stages of the investigation process, and there were 7 new cases that had not been started the investigations yet. Now this slide is just to give you a glimpse of the details of the cases that were in progress. Not really part of your brief, and if I can move on to the next slide then. Yes, the summary of cases finalized from 1 April 2019 to 30 September 2019. So here you will find you will see there were 19 cases finalized. It has a description of allegation type, what is the brief description of the outcome, and the date it was closed, and the department, the date it was finalized, and the department involved. But further detail on this are as per the next slides, which I will proceed with. But so here's the details of the outcome of those 19 cases. You will notice that there were in 3 cases findings of non-compliance with prescripts, in 2 cases irregularities and or non-compliance, 1 case of irregularity. In 2 cases, we could not find any, the allegations were unsubstantiated, no adverse findings, but we made recommendations, like in the previous case that I referred to earlier on, even if there's then if we feel that controls need to be improved. The next category is investigation with no adverse finding. There were 6 of those where the allegations were not substantiated. In 1 case, we found fraud. In another case, we found fraud and corruption. A 3rd case, we found fraud, corruption, and irregularity or non-compliance. Another case of corruption and fraud. So those are the combinations of the possible criminal activity. And finally, there was a case involving corruption, extortion, and theft. Now, let me say here, if we say fraud or corruption or theft, that is our investigative finding, and following that, we would obviously then lodge a case with the police, who will take it to a prosecutor and take it through court. So this is the provisional forensic investigation finding of criminality. Just as a summary here on the outcomes, 5 of these 19 cases, in 5 of those we found criminality, and that's about 26% of the cases finalized. And then in a total of 8 of them, there were adverse findings. All in all, 8 of the 19 cases adverse findings. That's about 57%. But okay, moving on to further detail, Chairperson, is a summary of this slide deals with the 19 cases taken together. What were the type of recommendations that were made in those cases? Now, there were 9 disciplinary actions recommended for the department to take disciplinary action. The feedback that we got is that 5 of those recommendations were implemented. Recommendations, there were 3 in 3 cases. The recommendations were not implementable, and in the next slide I'll share with you the reasons for that provided by the departments. And then there's one disciplinary action which is still in progress, has not been implemented yet. As far as control recommendations to improve control weaknesses, we made 21 such recommendations. 11 have not been implemented yet. 9 were implemented, and 1 were reported to be not implementable. I can also share with you later on as we go to the relevant department on the reason for that. We also made 1 recommendation to take civil action, and this recommendation was implemented. Now, civil action is usually where there must be a recovery of money that was the fruits of criminality. Moving on to of the 9 disciplinary recommendations that were made, in 2 cases, when we followed up on our recommendation, the departments indicated that the employees had resigned in the one case and retired in the other case. In one case, it was felt after the employee relations section looked at it, felt that there was not a solid information or evidence to take to a disciplinary action. Sometimes there's hearsay evidence or that kind of thing, and that was their decision. In 2 cases, disciplinary action was successfully done, and a final written warning was issued to the officials, together with a suspension without pay for 2 months. In one case, there was a dismissal of the employee from the department, and in 2 cases, 2 more minor cases, there were cautionary letters meted out to the relevant officials. Chairperson, then on the criminal cases that were lodged, there were we lodged on behalf of the departments where we found criminality in 4 cases. Cases with the Hawks or the police, and in one of the cases where we found criminality, a case had already been lodged by another party, and we just supplemented it with our affidavit on our investigation findings to assist the police with that. Now I will proceed to the specific departments. In these 2 quarters, there was only 1 case that we finalized with the Department of Health, and there were no adverse findings in this matter. In the Department of Education, there were 10 cases, and all these, I think 9 of these cases involved schools. So we made 2 investigation findings of non-compliance. 1 of irregularity and or non-compliance. In 2 cases, the investigation revealed no adverse findings, but we made recommendations to improve controls. In 2 cases, there were no findings, adverse findings made. And then in 3 cases, we found criminality, fraud and corruption in the one, the other one, fraud, corruption and non-compliance, irregularity, and the third one, corruption, extortion, and theft. Now, we are still dealing with the Education Department. The recommendations made in that case. So 7 disciplinary action recommendations were made, 4 were implemented, 3 were not implemented. The next slide will deal with that. We made 15 control recommendations, particularly in schools to improve controls. 10 have not been implemented yet, and our last follow-up on our recommendations were in the final quarter of 2019. That would have been in February this year, towards the end of February, let's say beginning of March this year. 10 had not been implemented yet. But they advised that 5 were implemented. Now, the outcomes of the disciplinary action recommendations in the Education Department, in 2 cases, in one case, educator retired and the other case resigned. Another case, this is the case where employee relations advised that they don't have sufficient evidence for a disciplinary matter. Then in 2 cases, final written warnings were given by the presiding officer with a suspension of pay for 2 months. And in 2 cases, cautionary letters were given to the officials. With regard to education department, 3 cases were finalized and reported to the police. Then moving on to the Department of Transport and Public Works. There were 2 cases that we finalized. In both cases, we found criminality, the one fraud and the other one fraud and corruption. Disciplinary actions that were recommended with regard to the recommendations in this department. There was 1 recommendation for disciplinary action to be taken. And as you will see with the next slide, that official was dismissed. We also made 3 recommendations to improve controls. 2 were implemented. The 1 was not implemented, and the department gave a valid reason there that it would be onerous and it would be expensive and time consuming, which we agree with, having considered their reasons. And then in one case, 1 recommendation was made to take civil action. The department implemented it, and civil recovery is in progress. As I mentioned, with the 1 disciplinary action recommendation, the official was dismissed from the department. Criminal cases, there was 1 criminal case lodged with the Hawks. The other one had already been reported, and we, as I mentioned earlier, gave a supplementary affidavit to the police. The Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport, there was, this is a smaller department, only 1 case, and there were no adverse findings made in this investigation. Regarding the Department of Human Settlements, there were 2 cases finalized. In 1 case, we found non-compliance with the prescript. In the other case, there were no adverse findings. With regard to the 1 case where there was non-compliance, we made a control recommendation and the department implemented it. If I can move on to Department of Economic Development and Tourism. There was also 1 case dealt with, and we found an irregularity in that case and made recommendations to improve controls. 1 of those recommendations were implemented or was implemented. The other one has not yet been implemented. It's in progress. Then with regard to the Department of Social Development, there were 2 cases completed. We found in 1 case irregularity or non-compliance, and in the other case, the allegation was not substantiated. In the 1 case which the allegation was substantiated, we made 1 disciplinary action recommendation, and we were informed by the department in our last follow-up that informal disciplinary process is in progress. And Chairperson, that brings me to the end of this presentation. I'm happy to take any reports, any
questions.
Questions, yeah.
That's a check. Chairperson?
Chair is missing in action.
You're on mute.
Apologies. My apologies, members. Now, honorable members, are there any questions?
Yes, Chair, can I ask?
Yes, honorable member.
Thank you very much. There is a slide, if you can go back to the slide of the education of the recommendations.
Just a moment, member, let me just maneuver it. Apologies.
Sorry, man. But if you, while you are trying to do that, I just want to find out, because initially there are recommendations that were not implemented on one slide, and it was about 10 of them that were not implemented. Yeah, this one. Okay. So on this one, the 10 that is not implemented, if maybe I can get, is it is it this one? This one is for the education.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That is correct, honorable member.
Okay. So there was another one before this. I'm trying also to check on my, because I've got it electronical. Before this one, there is where you were giving the overall, that there are some recommendations that were not implemented, and it wasn't just for education. I think it was the last. But anyway, I think it's this one. So for all the departments. So yes. On the recommendation not yet implemented, we have 11 here. So my question is that on this 11, is the education contributing to the highest number of this implementation that were not that hasn't commenced yet? Because I see on the education they've got more that were not implemented. And as you do the forensics, do you have the by when for the recommendations that you give a directive, or it's up to them whether to listen to you to implement what you suggest to them? Is there any consequence management to those departments that are not recommending, that are not implementing the recommendation? Because I tend to believe that it will be again a merry-go-round about when you recommend, and then you get the whistleblowers of some of the loopholes that are there. Because for that to happen, that means there are loopholes in some of the procurement that is happening. If I can make an example on the procurement, there are some loopholes that they need to tighten the screws. And if they are not doing that, that means someone else will come in. There will be the adverse actions, and before we can do something, a person will resign, and you are not going to be able to recover that money in the department. So how are we enforcing to make sure that we reduce the numbers of this the disciplinaries that are happening within the department, or any untoward behavior that are in the departments? Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable. Mr. Van Rensburg.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Maseko, on the first question, and it relates to this slide, of the recommendations not yet implemented, my understanding of your question was that whether the bulk of it relates to the education department. Yes, the bulk of the recommendations not yet implemented of those control recommendations relate to the Department of Education. You will find that most of those recommendations to improve controls relate to, for instance, to improve the financial policy and that kind of thing. And sometimes it is understandable that there is a process to be followed, and it would take some time. But it brings me to your second question about the now with this consequence management. Are there any timelines, and what is it that can be done, or are we doing? The processes that we follow after a forensic report has been issued to the head of department. We follow up once a quarter on those recommendations. So there's an engagement with the departmental officials. There's information to be provided, an engagement on that, and they do comply with that. What other mechanisms in place, even though we don't have necessarily oversight over this, but there are other mechanisms to facilitate implementation of the recommendations, and that is the reporting to audit committees. Every quarter, we as Provincial Forensic Services make presentations to audit committees, and we report to them on the status of implementation of recommendations. And they can then ask the necessary questions if they are concerned about delays. And similarly, and that is why we also appreciate this engagement with SCOPA. SCOPA also ask these kind of questions, and I think so. The whole governance mechanism facilitates and assists in having this done. With regard to disciplinary action, my understanding is that it is rather complicated. If an official resigns, gives let's say 24 hours notice against the rules to take disciplinary action if that person is out of the system. Where I would be a bit more concerned is if a person is allowed to retire whilst a recommendation is hanging over that person's head.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Rensburg. Yes, Honorable Maseko.
I'm covered, Chair.
Thanks very much. Any further question, honorable members? If there are no further questions, I think then that also takes us to the end of this presentation. Thank you very much, DG, and thank you very much, forensic team. Highly appreciated.
Yeah, Chair.
Sorry, Chair.
Honorable Maseko.
Thank you very much. I think maybe what needs to happen is that since we see that there is a bulk of those recommendations that are not happening in education, we would also have to put on the resolution to get the Department of Education in having an understanding of the processes for them. Why is it difficult to implement those recommendations? Because that means we'll always have the bulk to them, as if it might be our interpretation says that they are not taking those recommendations serious, and you might find the process of implementing those recommendations, that's the one that delays it, to make sure that there is a change that is needed within the department, that maybe the members have to have a policy change, that also their oversight have to come into place to help the Department of Education to try and deal with those challenges that they do have. That engagement, it will give us the direction of how can we also contribute in helping the department. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Honorable Maseko. Thanks very much, DG.
Yeah, Chairperson, on behalf of our department, I want to say thanks to you and the committee, I think, for the engagement. And again, just want to give you our commitment to support SCOPA, because I think we push the same agenda, as I've indicated earlier. So once again, on behalf of the Department of the Premier and the government as a whole, thank you very much for the engagement.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thanks. Honorable members, if we go to our agenda, our next item then on the agenda, having finished those presentations, is the consideration and adoption of Public Accounts Committee on its draft minutes of the 28th of February, and also the fourth quarterly report for the for the 2019-2020 financial year, and as well as the annual activity report by the 2019-2020 financial year. Now, I take it that we all got the copies of the minutes, Honorable members?
Yes, Chair.
If we can then
yes,
go,
Chair, we do.
if we can go then to the minutes, it will assist. Just quickly trying to page through my electronic minutes. Yes, there we are. 28th of February. It also shows the honorable members that were present as well as the apologies. And then the next page will be the welcome and attendance. Are there any issues or are there any matters arising out of those minutes? Then, yeah, fortunately, we've also got them on the screen as well. There's item 2 was the briefing by the Auditor General of South Africa on the audits predetermined.
Okay.
Okay, then the next point number 3, if you can just scroll up, and then that's the discussion on the matters of the acquisition of Erwin Dorenbach.
Hold it, Chair. Hold on that. We are looking at the screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe
Chair,
as a matter arising on
in
this.
support.
Members.
Yeah.
Yeah, just as a matter arising out of this, you know, we're supposed to have looked at this item on the 24th of April, but because of the lockdown, I kind of requested that this item must be postponed to a later date. And then also I was wary also of us holding, I don't think it's also one of those meetings preferable. You wouldn't want to have a virtual meeting over it because of its nature.
I'm in agreement, Chair.
Preferably you will want to have a kind of sit down setup of a meeting. So therefore the meeting is now scheduled. I think Mr. David, you will correct me. I think it's for the 12th of June.
Yes, Chairperson, you are correct. It's for the 12th
then
of June.
Then can I request the members, if it's on the 12th of June, because also our number, I think we're about 4 members, and then there'll be the support staff. I think among us, we won't be more than 10 really as a team. Maybe the chambers might be big enough where we can even have social distance among us. We can sit in such a way that there's social distance, and then just carry on with the meeting on a sit down for the 12th. How do members feel about that?
Chair, can I come in?
Yes, Honorable Maseko.
Chair, I do totally agree with you. I was just waiting for you to, that's why I said you must hold that slide, because that's what I was going to suggest, that this is one of those issues that we have to sit and have the conversation. It's not like the visual that we have limited engagement. And number 2, with the corona, what is happening now, I think there's a huge project that is coming at the same area that this is Dorenbach. Yeah, there is a transitional housing that is going to happen in the same place. So it will be great that we sit and we engage, and then we see the notes and the resolutions. Maybe as a chair for human settlement, I'll give an input of what information can we ask so that we add to what we have with what has cropped up after the corona now.
That's very good. Also coincidentally, Honorable Maseko, because it's also your portfolio, I was actually going to say, if members agree, you actually lead us in that, especially on the meeting of the 12th as well, because that's your department. If maybe there's a person who want to lead us on on questions and issues as well, it will be you.
In agreement, Chair.
So at least now we've confirmed in that. I think then after this, then Mr. Davis, you can just inform the people that were involved accordingly. And I think it's actually more than a month's notice, actually, if the notice goes out, even as of Monday or so. It's actually more than 21 days notice, and we tell them that, look, we apologize that it could not happen because of the lockdown. I think they will understand, but then it's scheduled for the sit-down meeting on the 12th of June. Thank
Chair,
you very much.
No problem, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, if
Yes,
we
Honourable
also, if we can say this will happen based on the outcome, because the engagement with the speaker, because they've suspended any meeting within his building, if we get
Yes. What I'll do also, I will also start engaging with the speaker as well regarding the matter, because it's actually one person of us also keeping informed as well as we're moving around this issue.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Well, thanks very much on that. Then the next, then it was the consideration. The screen is still put it back. Put the minutes.
Let's let our screen the quarterly now, Chairperson. There we go.
Is it visible? Minutes?
Oh, you want the minutes?
Oh yeah, I think the minutes then are fine. Eh? Can we then have a proposal for the acceptance and the adoption of the minutes?
I already suggested the adoption, Chair.
Yes, seconder for that.
I support Chairperson Deirdre Bartman.
Thank you very much, Honorable. And then that takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is the
quarterly.
Quarterlies.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's on the screen, Chair.
Okay. There is that, honorable members.
Okay, next page.
Mr. David.
Oh, sorry, it's Lizette. There we go.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Can we move?
Thank you, Chair.
Is it agreed on?
Yes, Chair, is agreed on. You can move.
Okay. Then if that's agreed on, Mr. David?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, members. Through you, Chair. So this quarterly report, that's just basically the activities. We had 2 meetings for the quarter, which is from January this year, 2020, to the end of March 2020. We only had 2 meetings. It's on the 14th of Feb and the 28th of Feb. All the stats are captured there as per our minutes, and in the pages to follow, it's basically just the attendance of the members that has been captured. Thank you, Lizette. Yeah, there we go. Number 8 is a table of members' attendance, so that has been captured. And then after that, Chairperson, it is basically what meetings was postponed, cancelled. We had none. There was no legislation that we dealt with. There was no oversight visits, interprovincial study tours. We didn't do anything of that for this quarter. We didn't deal with the appropriations bill, but there's just a budget, Chairperson. At the end of March 2020, we were allocated 100,000 Rand. We had a total expenditure for the year from June, when this committee was established by the new provincial parliament. We had a total expenditure of 60,895. That, Chairperson, is basically all of the adverts that we spent through the adverts of the annual report, etc., and the catering in the meetings, etc. And that's basically what we left with, Chairperson, 39,105, and that's going back into the pool of WCPP for a new reallocation from April this year, for a new reallocation, Chairperson. So that is this quarterly report, Chair, for the 4th quarter.
Can I come in, Chair?
Honorable Maseko.
Thank you very much. I think, Chair, the corona sort of played us down, because we wouldn't have that amount that we didn't use if we continued with our plans, and more importantly, the issue of sort of courses that we can attend in empowering us to do the oversight. We would have used that money to do that. But please, maybe if Dustin, you can keep that in mind. I think studying we can do online, even if we don't see each other. If we can do the research of, maybe individually we can do the research, and then we can say what is it that we can do where. But I trust Dustin will be the person that can direct us which way to go. That's number one. Number two, Dustin, a question on the tracking document. Is there some of the things that are still outstanding from the last financial year that we didn't conclude?
Member Maseko, basically it is just the resolutions that we had through the deliberation on the through the annual report period, that is October and November, and that has been scheduled, member. If I don't know if you can remember, but we had a draft committee program in February, and that has been updated with the chairperson yesterday when I had a chat with him. Basically just to incorporate it in our remaining meetings, Member Maseko. So we do have meetings where we basically going to have briefings on these resolutions tracking documents. But everything is up to date so far.
Okay, thank you very much. Because I was asking this because I'm trying to be naughty, chairperson, through you. There is a noise. Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the members actually is in a noisy place.
Okay, that's better. So I wanted to be sort of naughty chairperson, that if we don't have a lot that is still outstanding, because I didn't want us to have a lot of work, but there are a lot of changes that, like Member Bartman was saying, that are happening within the departments. And the most popular one for Western Cape is the Solidarity Fund. That how is it going? How was it mentioned? And I tend to suspect, I'm anticipating something is going to end up on our lap. So we might be proactive in saying that, how do we go about to get the report of the expenditures or the plannings of how did it go about the financial side of that Solidarity Fund in allocation to the Western Cape.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Chairperson, through you. Yes, member. So I will do some research on this, and then I will then discuss the matter then with the Chairperson, member, and then then the Chairperson will discuss it with the committee. But I will look into this matter, member.
Chairperson Deirdre Bartman, may we make extra resolutions now, or must I wait?
Let's wait for the resolution. I don't want us to get mixed up in the process.
Okay, no problem, Chairperson.
I'm in support of the Kochali report.
I support.
Sure. Okay, that's done, supported, proposed and supported, Honorable Maseko and Honorable Patman. Now the next item on the agenda will be the resolutions.
Sorry, Chairperson, through you. It's basically, there's just one more document, it's the annual activities report, Chairperson. So everything basically, annual activities report, Chairperson. Yeah, so Chairperson, so this is basically, Chair, this report was since June last year. So the committee considered all of the other quarterly reports, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter now. So Chairperson, this report is basically a holistic overview of all of those quarterly reports combined together, Chairperson. So as you can see on page 1, as Lazetti's screening, there's your committee membership, the alternate members. If we can just go down, thank you, Lizette. If we can just go down. Thank you. Right there, and then there's just the reporting entities and the departments. Is basically all of the entities and the departments of the Western Cape government that reports to this committee. If we can go down, Lizzie. Yes, the chairperson for the year so far, public hearings chairperson, all of our members, all of our meetings are public hearings according to the constitution. So we had 21 meetings, chairperson. Chairperson of that 21 meetings, we had 13 annual report meetings. That was October and November. We had 13 meetings with departments and entities. And so the remaining of that 13, which is about 8 meetings, we had individual committee meetings on a Friday.
Excellent.
If we can just go down, then chairperson, this is just so what I've done, chairperson, I've just taken it all per paragraph, each quarter, chairperson, just a highlight of who the committee met with and what was the engagement, chairperson, just like a high level analysis, chairperson, of what happened per quarter, chairperson. Nothing in-depth, chairperson, because that is in our individual respective minutes, chairperson.
Okay.
Chair, could we quickly go back? It said that we did one workshop, and for the life of me, I cannot remember now what the workshop was.
Oh, yes. Member, that was when the chairperson and member America, they were invited in August. On the 5th of August, they were invited to attend an APAC workshop in Johannesburg for 1 day, and that is the workshop that has been that needed to be captured there, member.
Okay, thank you, chairperson. I'm happy with that.
Dustin?
Yes, member.
Why am I not counted on the meeting I attended in Joburg? I don't matter in this committee.
Oh, sorry, my apologies, member. Sorry, my apologies. Saving the best for last, chairperson. Through you, member Maseko was present at that meeting.
Oh, yes, it's true. No,
she was present.
Then
and she
also
was very vocal in that meeting.
Even member Kleko.
Yes.
Even member Kleko was there, but I'm talking for member Maseko. Member Kleko will cover himself up.
Justin, don't mess with our members, please.
Member Kleko was also present. My apologies. Member Kleko, you have been recognized.
Then legislation, then it's facilitation of public participation.
Yes.
Then financial particulars.
Yes. Chairperson, through you, as the committee members know, SCOPA or the Public Accounts Committee does not deal with legislation. That is for the individual standing committees of the legislature. So we do not deal with any legislation, and it has been captured as such.
Okay.
Thanks. So, and then that takes us to the end.
That's it, Chair.
I support, Chair.
I second, Chair.
Seconded. Thanks very much. Honorable Klego.
Yes, my leader.
You are quiet.
Yes, I'm here, Chairman.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay. Now, and then that takes us to the next item, really, which is the resolutions.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the resolution, there are quite a number of issues that were raised really by members. Hopefully, you might have taken note of. But I think one of them, of course, can be this one of us having agreed on the meeting of the 12th.
Yeah.
Yes, Chairperson.
That's one resolution.
Yes,
There's
Chair.
also one. Yellow. Is the member saying something? Okay.
No,
then,
there's no one. We are in agreement with you, Chair.
Then the other one might have been the one I remember also specifically when we started. The Honorable Batman stressed the issue of the AG as well as the Department of the Provincial Treasury. Before, on everything, we must actually be informed about that. We must not be taken by surprise. I'm sure you might have noted that, Mr. David.
Chair, if I can just come in there, Chairperson. Yes, Chairperson, I've actually captured that, Chairperson. Chairperson, okay. on that, Chair, as the members, as they were making the resolution, I was looking at the PFMA, the Public Finance Management Act, and Section 65 says that the departments should basically submit their annual reports to the legislature within 6 months after they have concluded their financial statements, which means September month. So, Chairperson, is it then possible if we can arrange that meeting for September month, Chairperson, just before we start October with our annual report season, where we invite people, departments to come in and account for the annual report? Because I'm just fearing, Chairperson, if we have it too early in August month or so, then the annual reports of the departments and the AG might not be ready, and there might be some discrepancies, and then we invite them to come talk on it, and then changes might occur. If we maybe, through the parliamentary program, look at the last meeting date in September, before October, I think that will be an opportune time to meet with the AG and Provincial Treasury and Department of the Premier on this matter, Chairperson.
Chair, can I come in here?
Honorable Patman.
Chair, there are actually different aspects to what the AG and the department has to come back to us on. The first part is the predetermined objectives for an audit. That's the first part. And I don't want us to wait to September because the audit will be done. I want us to know while they are busy auditing, before the audit is done, what are the predetermined objectives they have agreed to? Remember, they said that the AG and the DG and the Provincial Treasury and the Office of the Premier, they're all going to sit together and they're still going to have this conversation. It's planned. So through you, Chair, they must actually let you know what dates and times they're going to have the conversation. And once they've agreed on those predetermined objectives of what the audit is going to cover, they must then, somewhere in that week or 2 weeks after that, present to SCOPA what those predetermined objectives are. The thing is, they mustn't come and tell us what the audit's outcomes are going to be. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, what are the factors, especially now that we have COVID-19, what are the factors they're going to take into account when doing their audit? And if we wait for September, we're going to end up with the same situation where we're doing oversight over something that's already happened instead of doing oversight over the factors before it happens. The second part of that, Chairperson, was the BBEE. And I think for that specifically, perhaps the procedural officer can assist. We should actually have, as a SCOPA, a half day or a full day workshop perhaps on the BBEE legislation. And then the Department of the Premier, the Provincial Treasury, and somewhere the DTI nationally must then come to that workshop, and every one of them give us a presentation, and then we can exhaust all of our questions on processes and hows and whys and everything, so that we can truly understand. And that must also happen before the September annual reports. And then the last part is a more general part of the same topic. We should then have maybe also as another half a day or a full day where we get a general presentation on how to go through annual reports in SCOPA. And that should happen before the annual report season as well. So that is my suggestion, Chairperson.
The last one.
Can I come in?
Just before you, Honorable Maseko, the last one on how to go through annual reports. Which department would want us to have discussion with regarding that?
Perhaps Provincial Treasury would want to do that, or maybe the DG and the Department of the Premier. I'm not sure where it would fall under, Chairperson.
Okay. Chair, if I can just come in?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So, just to advise on that, Chairperson, on the annual report. Normally what happens, Chairperson, is that we have a official, Mr. Jason of National Treasury, comes to brief the Budget Committee the first week in October before the annual report period starts to actually take them through what it entails. But for content analysis, which I get from Member Bartman, what the question is there is that it would actually be good if we can get the Auditor General in to just have a workshop with the committee members, basically on PDOs and how it fits into the financials, etc., and how to link it, and then as well have Provincial Treasury in there as well, Chairperson, because they have assisted the legislature with workshops with the public, with members of the public in the past, and the feedback that I got from there was that it was excellent, where the Treasury officials actually went into actual annual reports of the past and told the public, okay, this is what you asked for on this matter, you can ask these questions, these are the elements that you must look for. So that is just a suggestion from my side, Chairperson, for the committee.
Can I come in, Chair?
Yes, Honorable Maseko.
Okay, the first one on what I agree with Member Bartman. Just on the issue of the BBEE, we also have to arrange to meet after the Treasury and have had that meeting that the DDG was talking about, that behind the scene. Yeah. Even the Auditor General said they are still busy with that. So if we can get after that, then we will have the clear information of what is it that they talked about and what was the outcome of that meeting. Another one, Dustin, there was from National Treasury, there was a representative that came to brief us in October. Yes. Yes. I can't remember what he was good in explaining to us what is it that how should we do our annual reports? Yes. Can we get him? I think what Member Bartman is talking about, he was the right person that was giving indication of how should we go about when we do the INSCOPA, when we do the annual reports, and he was addressing the issue that Member Bartman have a problem with just doing the annual report but not get the briefing before of the department's indicators of what is it that is happening, because he was so unhappy about that happening that he was willing to come back to give us more information, and we had limited time then. Can we get him so that we can schedule him for the whole day, because you saw that the way he was explaining, we will need the whole day to sit with him, and because he was taking us from when they budget until we do the annual reports.
Chair, if I can just come in. Thank you, Chairperson, through you, Member. Thank you for that. Yes, as I said, Member, on this matter that you raised, is that we normally have the Budget Committee having such, every year, annually having such an engagement, and it's normally from National Treasury, is two individuals that come, is Jason, and we have Steve Kenyon. So the two of them, they will normally present to the committee on the just a high-level analysis. But I will speak to the Budget Committee coordinator just to see how we can, and speak to the presenters as well, and just speak to the SCOPA members, because at the end of the day, SCOPA does go more in depth with the financials and even find the linkage to the PDOs in the annual report. So I will have a discussion, Chairperson, with the SCOPA members, Chair, through you, and then also with the Budget Committee procedural officer to see how we can engage the presenter to have more elements of what the members want in the presentations.
And at least for this time, we are blessed. We have the budget chairperson in SCOPA.
Exactly.
Chair, I support any collaboration.
Excellent, excellent.
Amen.
Collaboration is always a symbol of strength. Eh?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, Chair, but can I ask a request that we please, with our workshops especially as well, that we allow public to also come to our workshops, because if we're paying for whatever's for these workshops to happen, then it will be more valuable if we allow the public to also attend our workshops, those who come. I mean, we already have some regulars at our SCOPA meeting. They might, for example, PMG might, for example, feel that they would like to join in the conversation in the workshop, or ask even a question to the respective departments on how do we read certain documents.
No, thanks very much. That's excellent. Now, further on resolution, I think if we move on, there's also a resolution on the outstanding investigation in the Department of Education. I think Honorable Maseko raised that.
Yes, Chair, the recommendation, the challenge of Department of Education in implementing the recommendation by the forensic.
About 10
we need to
outstanding.
engage with them. It's about 10 outstanding. So just for it not to recur again and again, we need to have that engagement of where's the difficulty in doing that.
Excellent. My last one really from my side, almost related, I think it's also been touched on by Honorable Maseko, especially to do with accounting. How do we make sure that, especially when it comes to solidarity funding, but also maybe even beyond funding, beyond that, because if we are saying during this COVID-19 phase, we are in the new normal, that means even in the manner in which we are holding a state to account is actually not going to be normal. We cannot wait for expenditure to happen, or we wait for it at the end result of the conveyor belt. If there are some ad hoc expenditure that we are doing as a province, it might be good that we also have some regular reporting on that as well, also including even this solidarity funding. If we must invite some of the people to make presentation about this funding, I think it will be a brilliant idea.
No problem, Chair. I've captured
and
it.
other expenditures that we are making as a province.
Chair, can I ask something? You know, this corona has sort of opened eyes on us of some of the things that sometimes we just were not going in depth to have an understanding. Dustin, help me. The NGOs, there's a huge bulk of allocation from the Department of Social Development that goes to the NGOs. Now, if we have to do the oversight of that money, the accessibility is just with the DSD, but we cannot access the NGOs to find out how are they looking at their financials. Or how can we go about that? Because it's a difficult one, but we do plow into that space.
But also maybe Honorable Maseko, before maybe Dustin might respond on that. You know, the fact that we are in COVID-19, we are experiencing this problem. It does not mean that our responsibility of oversight has come to a standstill. If we need be to conduct, because especially on this issue you are raising of the DSD and NGO, it's something that is happening right throughout the country. You see, especially with this NGO, you might find that some funding has been given to them, they must do this, but on the ground you don't see that. And I think there's nothing wrong in us asking the department now, actually, before we might wait for the audit to take place, to say that, look, department, give us the list of this NGO you have funded for this thing, for this during this period, so that if even where they are located as well, maybe we can say report per district. Then if need be that we must conduct oversight there, at least we do have our permit. We are, as public representatives, we are essential workers. There is nothing wrong to say that if this NGO of Honorable Maseko has received funding, they say they are going to do soup kitchens. We go and have a look if that soup kitchen is really being done there, or they say, look, they are going to feed so many people. Has that been done? Otherwise, we might end up having a problem at the end of the conveyor belt, whereby we're saying, no, money was used for this, was given for this thing, but it was never spent exactly for that. I don't think our oversight responsibility means that we must, it must come to a standard. I think we can request that. There's nothing wrong as the committee that we would like to have a response, because the money has already been spent. We know about that. So, but then how has it been spent? In which areas? Maybe reports per district. Then once you get it per district, it will also give you per municipality as well. Once it's per municipality, it will show you which areas or which places have been, or which NGO has been given that funding. I think we can take that resolution.
No, Chairperson, you have really captured what was my concern. So I'm just going to leave it in your capable hands to apply your mind to say, how can we go about and when can we do that?
No, excellent. I think between myself and the procedural officer in consultation with you, because also we probably be one committee that should not be inactive during this time. So you must expect that maybe I might give you a call and say, members, there is this thing, how do we tackle it? There is this thing, how do we tackle it? So that we are not caught off guard, because when something hits the fan, people are going to say, but where was the Standing Committee on Public Account when these things happen? But I think
that's true.
Sorry, Chair. Indeed, if we can be able to be proactive than being reactionary.
Exactly.
It will assist, because if you would look, some of the some form of unrest that took place in terms of people looting shops and everything, the numbers were very high in the Western Cape. And also, which means therefore, for us to look at issues that have got everything to do with socio-economic challenges that are affecting our people, it will assist. And also it will keep the NGOs and as well as the departments on their toes, that we are not going to wait until COVID is finalized and then we come and do a sort of an assessment. We somehow do it currently whilst the money, the spendings are still taking place. I think that's a very great idea, Chairperson.
I don't know how do members feel about it, so that we can be practical about it. I know most of the time at best we are always required to be at home or visit sometimes some of our constituencies now and then. Maybe if we want to be practical about it, depending on how quick, I don't know how quick, Dustin, you can get a report. Maybe we look for the highest expenditure that has been given on this. We identify that spot, maybe as the Standing Committee on Public Account, we visit that spot so that we can actually familiarize ourselves and we can have a direct person-to-person with that experience.
Can I come in, Chair?
Yes, Honorable
I can help on that one. I think the first one before the NGOs, it is there is an allocation from the Department of Local Government to the municipalities in the food relief that they just received now. So I think it is ideal because the municipalities, they are allocating that money to the NGOs to be the one that are implementing those feeding schemes. So if we can follow the trail of the money and say how is it going to be used, that will be brilliant for us to say where is that happening.
Just for thanks for that information, Honorable Marcel. Maybe to be practical among members, which municipality do you think we can identify and we say, look, we would like to go and do oversight on that municipality? I really am easy, I'm open, honorable members.
Yes, I would suggest Bito.
Damn, man.
We are not surprised, member.
Damn, man. No, this was okay. No problem. Any?
I think, Chair, if we can get the information, you see most of
let's ask Honorable. So let's ask Honorable David, Mr. David. So he definitely will have a list of that. It might maybe not be one municipality. It might be more. If we say, if for example, Pito is in the Eden district area or in the Southern Cape, it can be maybe a couple of municipalities in the Southern Cape, 2 or 3 in the Southern Cape.
Yes. Chair, let me get a list, Chairperson, and
Okay.
then I will
But I
convene
like
with
this
you.
idea of Vito. You want to bring it home, this one. Honorable.
Then, Chairperson, then I'll just convene with you with it, and then we can discuss it with the committee and make a resolution, and then take it from there, Chairperson.
No,
Can
excellent.
I come in, Chair?
Yes,
Can
yes,
we
Honorable.
get the list from the Department of Local Government, the allocation?
Yes.
Two, can we also get the allocation from the Department of Social Development of the NGO they used? Then it's going to be easy for both of you to say, where do we start?
Yes.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
No problem.
I fully agree.
Thanks very much, honorable members. Is there any other resolution, honorable members? Those were some that have managed to capture as we're actually having discussions.
Yeah.
If there is no any other resolution, is there any other issue? If there is no other issue, honorable members, that means that to a certain extent we have come to the end of our meeting. Let me make use of this opportunity to thank you very much. It has been one of those historical meetings. It's the first of its type, and I must say it has continued without any hiccups or without any glitches. And then I think we have actually done very well. Just for the sake of a record, can I just indicate the members who are still available? Can I just mention so that we can have a full record of all the members who are present?
Member Masego present.
Thank you very much, Honorable Masego. Honorable Padman, thank you very much.
Derek is still here.
Honorable Tego. Yes.
Derek
And
is still here. Thank you.
Honorable.
America is still here.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, you've been watching us quietly in your study room. No, thank you very much, honorable members. I think the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye. Thank you, Chair. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Dustin.
Thank you, members. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye. I'm